You know what? I might play a 2-on-1 here, North Carolina fans. Yeah, we're going at it this week. We're beefing.
Beefing?
You're not gonna talk to us the whole week.
I'm talking about beef, no chicken. I'm talking about ground beef. No, I didn't talk to Andy when we. I don't even remember that when Alabama played Auburn. I didn't talk to Andy the entire week. So, I don't know. Maybe I won't talk to y'all anymore.
The following is a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.
Hello, everyone. Welcome in, students of the game. My name is Alex Baumann, and joined by my two co-hosts today, Nathan Glidewell and Oldenburg. Guys, the first two rounds of the NCAA tournament have come and gone. Our brackets are pretty busted. We were not one of the few that had their perfect brackets within like the last two games of the first night. I think Nathan was busted within the first game.
Yes,
I think
it was.
mine busted with the Duquesne BYU game.
Was that?
Yeah, so we didn't spend a lot of time this year with a perfect bracket, unfortunately. So, guys, what did you see in the first two rounds that surprised you or you liked?
I saw competitive basketball throughout the way, outside of maybe 3 or 4 games in the first two rounds, all coming from the one seeds, really, and maybe Tennessee beating up on St. Peter's, which was sad. I saw competitive basketball, and that's what you expect from this tournament. That's what you expect from March, and every single one of these teams is expected to be competitive. I'd probably say the worst thing that I saw was Virginia making this tournament and then scoring 11 points in the first half in their first 4 game or something like that, and losing by 25 to a team that Virginia should never lose to in the tournament. I think Tony Bennett's time should be coming to an end very, very soon at Virginia. He has 6 wins in March in his entire career at Virginia. All of them came from that 1 year in 2019. And when he won the national championship, he also has that horrible loss to UMBC in the first round when they were the #1 overall seed. Talk about things that I didn't like watching Virginia, didn't like how they made the tournament over some of the teams that did not make the tournament. But what I did like is I saw a lot of upsets, which is just fun. Saw a lot of SEC teams just crap right in front of them. And look, it's a great tournament. It was a lot of fun to watch.
Yeah, I'll have to agree with you there. Competitiveness, definitely, there was not a lack of. But I think what's more surprising is the fact that we still have all the 1 seeds remaining, and I believe all the 2 seeds as well. Which going into the tournament, I don't think anyone would have expected it. We've had 2 seeds go down the first round past 3 years, and this is the first year without it. And we could have sat here, went through the best possible upset picks and whatnot, and you get to the Sweet 16, it just doesn't matter. I mean, the only seed past 6 is NC State, who's left, and that's 11. And then Clemson's borderline; they're a 6 seed. So really, if you want to say the cutoff is 5, because I think Clemson probably could have been a 5 seed. Then I mean, it's kind of crazy how even though we started with a bunch of upsets and all that, it's been really more of a top-heavy tournament.
Yeah, there really hasn't been a lot of Cinderellas this year. I mean, I don't really consider NC State a Cinderella because they won the conference.
Won the ACC, exactly.
Yeah, so there really is not a quote-unquote Cinderella. I mean, if Oakland would have won against NC State, maybe, but there really isn't one. That's surprising because we're used to having at least that one tournament darling that comes from out of nowhere and gets to the Sweet 16, maybe to the Elite 8, maybe Final 4. But it just hasn't happened this year. It's really just stayed pat, like I pointed out. All the 1 seeds are there, all the 2 seeds are there. It's just it's uncharacteristic, even as weird as that is to say that we have all these top seeds remaining. Yeah. Are there any games that stuck out to y'all in the first 2 rounds?
I'm just going to go ahead and pull the trigger. I think the Kansas and Samford game really stuck out to me. That look, I picked Samford. I really thought Samford would be the team to beat a team like Kansas in the first round. Kansas Without one of their top scorers, Hunter Dickinson's not 100%. I was prepared for Kansas to come in and kind of just think that we're going to be able to overpower Samford and then Samford to respond on that. But then Kansas came out in the first half, shot like 88% from the field, and was playing unbelievably well. Got up to a really sizable lead and had control of most of the game. And then Samford came back and just inched back in the ball game, and had it down to one, and got a breakaway block and got called for a foul, and couldn't finish. And then Kansas went on to lay an egg against Gonzaga in the second round. I thought that was the most fun game to watch for me, maybe outside of the Oakland Kentucky game. That was probably the most fun game to watch. Coming from Birmingham, I was really rooting for Samford in that game, and they got absolutely hosed.
Yeah, I think we all were. And that call, I'm sure we'll get into the officiating here in a minute, but it was terrible to watch. For me, I think I'm going to stick with NC State for an ACC tournament winner to be slotted at the 11 seed mark, especially the way they finished the season, was very surprising to me. But the way they came out in the first round and just took care of business in the first round versus Texas Tech, which is a really good basketball team. They played fantastic in the Big 12. And there was a reason they were a 6 seed this season. And then to continue the run, even though it is against number 14 seed Oakland played fantastic basketball in the first round against Kentucky, and in the second round took it to overtime and just came up short. But I really think it shows a lot how NC State has been super competitive in the postseason, especially with the two GJs. DJ Burns has been heavily relied on. He has answered the call more times than not.
Yeah, so talking about the Kentucky Oakland game, guys, Coach Cal is what, 1-4 in his past 4 tournaments, and he's missed one of them, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, is it time for Kentucky to get rid of him? I know he can recruit well, but when he gets to March, he has that one national championship. That's it.
Yeah, I think it is time for Kentucky to look elsewhere, because there's not another coach. Because there are coaches that have just not been as successful in March as they should be. I would say Bruce Pearl's up there outside of the Final Four run. I would say Rick Barnes is up there, even though they're in the Sweet 16.
Matt Painter.
Like, there are a lot of coaches that probably should be more successful in March, but there's not coaches who have the type of players and the type of talent and the type of history that Kentucky does, and they're even less successful than those teams in March. At least since that national championship game. I mean, they've had one Elite Eight appearance since then. And it was the year that they lost to Auburn in 2019. So, yeah, I don't know if Calipari, I don't know how much longer Calipari's got. Look, his buyout's like $34 million. I know that Kentucky basketball program could pull that out of their hat, but that's going to be a tough ask to move away from a coach who's got such history of that program, but he has shown to just do so less with so much talent and recruit so well, and they go on to be incredible NBA players, but they can't get it done in March.
I don't know. This is one of the things I'm borderline about, because I think Calipari has shown that he can be a great top tier coach. But then we get into the first round of the tournament, and he just doesn't play. He doesn't coach well against lesser opponents. And you talk about the amount of talent Kentucky had this season. I mean, they were the most talented team in the tournament. They were young, of course, and they're super inexperienced. But when you have that much talent, you really expect them to at least win your first round game against a 14 seed. And that just didn't happen. Oakland is a Cinderella team or not, you have to come out and play your best basketball in March. And Calipari, more times than not, has not had his team ready. And that's a fact that can't be ignored. But another fact that can't be ignored is how much it's going to cost to get rid of him. Not only to get rid of him, but to replace him and go ahead and get another coach on contract. That's a lot of money. And I don't know if the university is quite ready to spend that. Especially when you have a coach that has won the national championship, it's harder to make that decision. because there is more coaches out there that haven't won a national championship than have. But at the end of the day, do I think Calipari's run at Kentucky is coming to a close? I think it's heading towards that way. It's sad, especially with the way he's recruited and the way that he has coached in the past. But when you keep having these types of results, you can't expect to still have your job.
Yeah, I think for Kentucky and Coach Cal, it's going to come down to if you fire Coach Cal, who are we going to hire? And as of right now, Dusty May's off the market. I don't think you're going to get a guy like Nate Oates anymore.
How
Who,
you can 50,
yeah,
it'd be like 50 something million. I don't think Kentucky wants to
yeah.
spend that much.
I don't see any of these teams coaches that are left in the tournament leaving. I don't see Kevin Keats leaving NC State. They love him there. I don't see any of these coaches leave. I don't see some of these like Cinderella teams, these surprise teams like a James Madison coach being better than Coach Cal or any of that. You look at Drake, their coaches now at West Virginia. So there's not a lot of options out there for Kentucky to go, hey, let's buy out Coach Cal. Let's go hire this guy because we know he's going to be better. I mean, there's not a lot of coaches on the market right now that are going to come in day one and one, recruit better than Coach Cal, and then two, perform in the tournament. Coach Cal's already got one of those things done. He's going to win in the tournament. I don't know how he's going to do that. I think it's going to come down to the realization that you can't just go and recruit all these freshmen because in this day and age of college basketball and college sports, these more experienced teams are going to win these games. They're going to have a lot more experience. They're not going to rely on these freshmen when the lights get bright. As we saw with Kentucky, they choked. Rob Dillingham, Reed Shepherd disappeared. So I think Coach Cal's going to have to dive much more into the transfer portal than he has in the past and not rely and recruit these freshmen as much as he has because as we've seen these past few years, it's not worked out. So moving forward, if they're going to keep Coach Cal, he's going to have to change his philosophy when it comes to recruiting and bringing in players because as of right now, it's not performing the way it needs to be at Kentucky. Before we move on to predicting the Sweet 16 guys, Gray, we have to talk about it. Yep. We were going to get through the whole show and not talk about the first round matchup with Auburn and Yale. Any thoughts here on Auburn's 2-point loss to Yale?
Yeah, I knew when it was 10-2, and Janai Broome had 7 of our first 10, and Yale had missed their opening 4 shots, and they ejected one of our best players for doing something that in an SEC game a ref wouldn't even call a common foul. I knew we were in trouble. You give credit to Yale that number 4. I'm not even going to try and pronounce his last name. Who had 28 points, went 6 of 9 from 3. That dude was fantastic. It was very, very similar to the Jack Golke guy. I think he's a little bit more well-rounded than Golke is. But you give credit to Yale. Yale came out, especially in the second half after being down 7 to Auburn, and really took advantage of Auburn's lack of the depth at the 3 spot without Chad Baker-Mazara. Chris Moore played about as good as he can, but not having that scoring threat at the 3 spot hurt Auburn so much. And it wasn't Auburn had chances to win down the stretch. I never thought they were going to be able to do it because they didn't have Baker-Mazara. And he's not that big of an impact. He's not that big of a difference maker, or he wasn't this past year. But not having your starting small forward out there completely changes your entire team. You take that up for anybody. It completely changes your entire team. This was not the same Auburn team that we watched in the SEC tournament or really all year, especially in the second half. And then the free throws down the stretch. Look, we saw last year in the second round where Auburn was dominating Houston the entire game. The entire game in Birmingham, Auburn was in control of that game against Houston. Janai Broome was playing outstanding. But then Houston realized, he's not a very good free throw shooter. We're just going to foul him every time he catches it in the post. And Broome goes 6 of 16 from the free throw line, and Houston just kind of caught up because Houston was a really good team. That's kind of what happened here. as well. Auburn had chances with free throws down the stretch to not only get back in the game, but win the game. And didn't capitalize. You had a 92% free throw shooter, Denver Jones, missed two. You had an 80% free throw shooter, and Trey Donaldson missed two. You had Katie Johnson. What the absolute crap was he doing? You don't blame it on Bruce. You don't blame it on the players. You especially don't blame it on the refs. Yes, was that a soft call to eject one of the best players on this Auburn team 3 minutes into the game? Yeah. Does it change the outcome of the game? Maybe. But all Auburn needs to do now is regroup and start preparing for next year. You have two unbelievable recruits coming in next year. You're going to have to hit the transfer portal, especially for a big, because you do expect Janai Broom to leave along with Jalen Williams. And then see who wants to come back. So it's a tough loss on a successful season from Auburn, winning the SEC tournament championship, being as successful as they were in the regular season. It's a hard way to end, but it happens.
Yeah. I will say this about Auburn: their competitiveness did not lack in that game. It was a very back and forth battle. Sometimes it felt a lot like the Kentucky game. They just kind of had that spark where once you got past a certain point of the game, they could kind of see that light at the tunnel, and Yale just kind of continued to push for that. Even when Auburn had the 10-point lead, it didn't feel like the game was out of reach for Yale based on the way they were shooting basketball. What I will say with Chad Baker-Mazara, was it a soft ejection? Yes. I don't agree with the flagrant 2 call. Flagrant run, yeah, it was definitely intentional.
Yes, 100%.
But the fact of the matter is, if you put yourself in that situation, it happens. If you play smart basketball, if you play level-headed and calm down, then you're still in the game. You can't be making those types of plays. It's a lot like what Nick Pringle does, and Nick Pringle has his own issues with his anger, and he needs to figure that out. But it's very similar. If you do not put yourself in that situation, it doesn't happen. And really, it doesn't just hurt you, but it hurts your entire team. Because the way Auburn had to play without Chad Baker-Mazara in the lineup really completely changed up Bruce Pearl's plan for the game. Because I'm sure he was a vital part of their plan for success. Speaking on free throws, look, I mean, I experienced this. I was there a few years ago when Alabama played UCLA, and we watched the Sweet 16 games because we couldn't make free throws. They're free throws for a reason. They're free points. And if you can't take advantage of them in bars, you don't deserve to win the game. But going down the stretch, for as many good free throw shooters to miss what they missed was insane. Especially Trey Donaldson at the line to tie the game. He missed both of them. Really uncharacteristic. But I really thought Auburn just kind of got out of their comfort zone, especially in the last 2 minutes of the game. Going down the offensive end, they kind of just looked like they didn't have a plan in place, and they were just looking for an open shot, and they just kept swinging the ball, and they got late in the shot clock, and it just kind of fell apart. In those types of situations, maybe you take a time out there, maybe not, but you got to stick with the game plan you have in place, and I think Auburn just went away from that, and that's kind of what helped Yale out in this situation. Not to mention Neal being very good free throw shooters and very good shooters as is, but it's a tough loss. I don't think anyone out of all the 4 seeds, I did not predict Auburn to get upset in the first round. I thought Kansas was up there. Bama was definitely up there with most people. I mean, you could have looked at a dude for Vermont and said, "Hey, that was a pick you could have made," but I never thought that Auburn would have went down the first round.
Yeah, I don't think any of us had him going down in the first round. I believe me and Gray had him in the Final Four, so
I had him in the Elite Eight. We had him going far.
Yeah. I think what came down for Auburn, what I guess I kind of ignored looking into March Madness, was the fact that they didn't have a dominant guard you look for. Denver Jones, I know he had 17 points in this game, but Aiden Holloway 0 for 5, Trey Donaldson 2 for 7, Katie Johnson 3 for 9. I mean, Auburn really liked that dominant guard you need all year. You look at Bruce's most I guess best team he's had under him. They got to that Final Four. Jared Harper, Bryce Brown, Samir Dowdy. I mean, they were dominated with the guard play. And not saying you can't win a national championship with Janai Broome being your main go-to guy, but you look at these teams in March. Alabama, for example, Mark Sears. Alabama struggled to get shots up and struggled to make them in early in the shot clock at the beginning part against Grand Canyon. But Mark Sears said, you know what, we're struggling. Let me take over. And he did. Auburn doesn't really have that guy. And I think that's one thing Bruce is going to have to address in the transfer portal, or some, he's going to have to figure something out, because going forward, if he's going to want to compete in March, he's going to have a dominant guard, whether somehow Aiden Holloway develops into that guy, or like I said, if he brings in somebody in the transfer portal. So I think going forward, Bruce is going to have to change his philosophy to, hey, we're going to have to start using some guard play much more than relying on somebody like Janai Broome.
Yeah, it's completely, yeah, you nailed it. This tournament is about having good guards. You look at the teams that are still playing: Houston, Jamal Shed. You got UConn with Stephen Cassell and Castle, and they're incredible.
Yeah, there's
you look at Alabama and Mark Sears. You look at North Carolina and RJ Davis. Look at Tennessee and Zakai Ziegler, and
Arizona has Caleb Love.
And there's Caleb Love at Arizona.
DJ Horn.
So you've got to have good guards, and guards that, just like you said, Alex, can take over a game when things aren't going to the game plan. And when Auburn's game plan went and got a little scrambled with Mick Mazzar being out of the game and them starting to double Janai Broome and Jalen Williams, we just started looking for open shots. Everything fell apart, and Auburn didn't have that guy to go, all right, let's settle down. Let me get a bucket. Let me get a second bucket. Let me run this offense. Let's get back to what we're good at doing. And Auburn hasn't had that guy since Jared Harper. Sharif Cooper could have been that guy, but he played 12 games due to the NCAA stuff. And then Javon McCormick was never him. Auburn hasn't had that guy since then. Wendell Green definitely wasn't him. That's what Auburn needs to have. And I think you could have that in a guy like Denver Jones next year. I feel like Denver Jones took a while to adjust to playing SEC basketball this year, coming from Florida International. That's a guy who averaged 21 points at Florida International. He could be a scorer. He could be your dominant. He could be the Bryce Brown, but you've got to have a Jared Harper with that too, because if Aiden Holloway's 0 for 5, they're not going to leave Denver Jones. So is it Aiden Holloway developing into that spot at the 1? Maybe. He's going to have to put on 35, 40 pounds of muscle if he wants to do that. Is it relying on a guy like Todd Pettiford coming in next year? He's a 5-star, he's number 1 point guard in the class. And he is that type of player. But you're relying on a freshman at that point. Does Trey Donaldson develop into that guy? Trey Donaldson's going to have to get better at shooting the ball from the outside. He's got to be a better free throw shooter if he wants to be that guy. So, yeah, y'all nailed it. It is a guard-dominated league, and for the past 3 years, Auburn has been very big heavy. With Jabari and Walker, and then Janai Broome and Jalen Williams. Auburn, if they want to have success in March, they've got to get back to having those, guards that can shoot over anybody and just can get by anybody anytime they want and find the open man when the defense collapses. So you're right.
All right, guys. Now that we have covered all of our bases with the first 2 rounds, let's go ahead and look at the rest of the tournament going forward here. Starting with the East region, the Sweet 16, the 4 teams left in that region. You got UConn playing San Diego State, and Iowa State playing Illinois. Who do you have coming out of this region now that you see these final 4 teams for them?
I definitely got to go with UConn. I think UConn blows by San Diego State. I think Jay Ledee will give them everything he's got. But I think UConn just advances in 2 easy game fashions because Iowa State hasn't seen a team like UConn. I know they played in the Big 12 and they played Houston and Kansas and Baylor and all those teams. UConn just looks different. They share the ball different. They run sets different. They play defense different. They look like a different team. They look like they belong in a different league. I'm not saying they belong in a professional league like Mike Greenberg said this morning. I'm saying that they don't belong playing San Diego State or Illinois or Iowa State. They look unbelievable. they're going to be hard to stop. So I'm going to go UConn.
Well, I think UConn definitely gets the win in the Sweet 16 against San Diego State. I just don't think San Diego State can match up offensively to what UConn produces. And then I look at the other matchup, Illinois and Iowa State. I like the way Illinois has continued to play basketball in the first few rounds. Iowa State had a tough matchup last game against Washington State. They ended up taking care of business. But for the way Illinois has been playing on the offensive end, I think I'm going to give them the edge just a little bit. But I definitely still think UConn comes out of this East region because they just look unstoppable at this moment in time.
Yeah, I have to agree with Nathan there. I think Illinois gets the win over Iowa State just because how well Terrence Shannon and Damask are playing for them. Iowa State really did struggle against Washington State. The big man, Milan, I don't really know how to pronounce his last name. It's a tongue tie. He didn't really play great. The guards for Iowa State didn't play up to what they're normally playing. And I think Illinois will get that win just based off the two guys they have that have the ability to take over a game at the guard position. And then obviously UConn gets the win over San Diego State. Like y'all both pointed out, San Diego State doesn't have the firepower to keep up with UConn. And as much as I want to see Illinois get the win over UConn, I just don't see it happening. UConn has too many guys. Their defense is suffocating. And I just don't see Terrence Shannon going off for 50 points to somehow beat UConn, even though he went off of 40 in the Big Ten tournament.
Mm-hmm.
Moving over to the right, guys, with the South region, Houston and Duke play each other in that Sweet 16 matchup, and then NC State Marquette. Who do you have coming out of this region?
So I do have Houston beating Duke. I think Duke is playing the best basketball that they've played all year. These past two games against Vermont and then against James Madison. I know it's against the 13 seed or 12 seed, but I think Duke is playing the best that they've been playing all year. I thought that the worst that they were playing all year was the loss to North Carolina at home, and then the first loss to who they lose. They lose to NC State in the tournament.
Yes, they did.
Yeah, they lost to NC State. So I like the way Duke's playing. I think John Shire's got on the up and up, and he's got a heck of a class coming in next year with like 5 top 10 players. But I do think Houston advances in this game. And then I like NC State against Marquette. I think for this to be a 2 seed versus an 11 seed, I think this is favoring NC State in this game. I don't think Marquette has any guy to stop either DJ Thorne or DJ Horn or DJ Burns, and they will run the offense through those two. Like DJ Burns at the post is outstanding. His footwork's incredible. For as big as he is and as strong as he is, he really is smooth when it comes to scoring the ball in the post and also facilitating off of that. But I do think the NC State run comes to an end when they play Houston. I have Houston advancing to the Final Four.
Yeah, I think you had it exactly right. I like the way Duke has been playing basketball as well. But the fact of the matter is, I look at the team Kelvin Sampson has in place, LJ Cryer, Jamal Shed, very dominant at the guard position, but they know how to play physical defense, and at times they can be very suffocating. And when they get going on offense, I mean, they're hard to stop. I look at Duke and where they had struggled this season, and where they had struggled on defense in the most part, and especially in the paint. I feel like Kyle Filipowski has not been the rim protector that they've needed him to be at times. I mean, he's played better in the tournament, but I still don't think he's all the way there. So I think I'm going to get the edge to Houston in that matchup. And then I look at NC State against Marquette. Marquette just barely escaped Colorado. And I know Colorado kind of plays a little bit similar style game to what NC State plays, but I look at DJ Burns in the run he has been on so far. He's a massive dude. He's hard to stop in the paint, especially when he gets all the way down there. And I'm sure he's feeling it. I don't think Marquette's guard play can outplay NC State in this matchup, so I'm going to go ahead and give it to NC State. And then I have Houston coming out. Houston's a team that is built to make the Final Four. Kelvin Sampson has coached this team extremely well throughout the season, and I don't see any reason why he should stop in these last 3 to 4 games of the season.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree that Houston gets past Duke. I know Duke had a pretty big one over James Madison, but that was really in part due to Jared McCain having the game of his life. I believe at halftime he was shooting perfect from 3, and he'd almost single-handedly outscored James Madison. But I think Houston's defense is going to suffocate around Jared McCain and force somebody like Tyrese Proctor to take over the game. I don't think Proctor has that ability. So I'm going to get Houston to get that win over Duke. I'm going to go a little bit different here. I think Marquette gets the win over NC State. Like Nathan kind of pointed out, Colorado plays a similar style to NC State. Colorado also has a pretty big character on their team, and Eddie Lampkin, very similar to a guy like DJ Burns. And Marquette, Tyler Kolek at the guard position alongside Cam Jones. Those two guys are going to take over this game, in my opinion, and dominate. You looked at NC State when they played Oakland. I believe DJ Horn went, I want to say, almost 40 minutes of game time without scoring a basket. So if Marquette's able to hold DJ Horn to struggle, I think they get the win just due to Tyler Kolek and Cam Jones's prolific play on the perimeter. So I'll take NC State to play Houston. As much as I want to go against Houston and pick Marquette here to get the win, it's just going to once again come down to Houston suffocating defense and Jamal Shead being the leader of that team and him helping them get to the Final Four. All right, guys, the Midwest here. Purdue plays Gonzaga, and then Creighton plays Tennessee. Once again, who do we have coming out of this region?
Look, a lot like Duke, Gonzaga's playing their best basketball at the right time as well. Two unbelievable performances from Gonzaga. I think Gonzaga's got a real shot in this game against Purdue. The way that they played against McNeese, and if they shoot the ball like they did against Kansas, against Purdue, they'll have a real shot. But the officials will not let Purdue lose, so I'm going to go Purdue. And then this is probably my second favorite Sweet 16 game. With Creighton and Tennessee. I think whoever comes out of this game beats Purdue and advances to the Final Four. Can't wait to watch Connect and Ziegler go up against Shireman and Trey Alexander. I'm really excited for this matchup. I'm gonna go Creighton. I think Tennessee's defense is really good, but if they do look a little lost sometimes, if Connect isn't playing that well, and Connect did not shoot the ball well when they played Texas. If Tennessee is a repeat performance of their game against Texas, Creighton advances easily or smoothly, I'll say, and then I'll have Creighton to the Final Four.
I like that, and look, the Purdue Gonzaga matchup. Gonzaga just doesn't have the firepower to stop a guy in Zach Edey or the three officials that follow him in the lunch line. So I'm gonna go ahead and donate Purdue the win, even though I think it's going to be a close game. And then I look at Creighton, Tennessee. Tennessee struggled against a Texas team that has not played some of their best basketball all season long. I feel like they got a pretty easy matchup in the first round of the tournament against a team in Colorado State, which I don't think was built for the moment. And then Texas kind of fell short there against Tennessee. Matt Haysmith kind of forced up some shots late. For Tennessee to win against Creighton, they're going to have to play suffocating defense. They're going to have to force a lot of turnovers, and no doubt, I think they can do that. But what it comes down to, I think Creighton just has too many playmakers on their team on the offensive end of the court, and the way that they run their offense, I think it gets people out of place. And for a team like Tennessee, I feel like they kind of play undisciplined at times. So I'm going to give Creighton that win, and then like you, Gray, I'm going to go ahead and give Creighton the winner for Purdue. There's just some said about the way Creighton has been playing basketball, even with the win against Oregon. I felt like they took care of business, and it took a miracle to get Oregon into an overtime, not to mention a second overtime. So I like Creighton to come out of this region.
I think we should call the Purdue Gonzaga game the Nathan Bowl, considering those are his two favorite college basketball teams right there. Yeah. Purdue with Zach Edey, and then you have Gonzaga. Nathan just has lasting hate for Gonzaga because of Drew Timme. So we should call that the Nathan Bowl there. But I do think Purdue, the way they've been playing these last two games, I mean, they absolutely destroyed Utah State. Zach Edey has been playing really good. I'll have to give him his flowers, regardless if you think the refs give him all the calls in the world. He's still been playing really good. I think he had a 2020 game in the first round. I think Gonzaga, if they're able to shoot, like Gray said, shoot the ball like they did in the first two rounds of the tournament, then I think they have a chance. But Purdue, Zach Edey, the best player of that matchup, going to take him there. And then Creighton versus Tennessee. Like Nathan touched on, Tennessee probably should have lost that game to Texas if Texas was an actually competent basketball team. but Texas is playing just as bad as Tennessee on the offensive end of the court. So unfortunately, Tennessee did move on there, and they're going to play Creighton. And once in Creighton, like Nathan once again pointed out, Oregon was really fortunate to get into the overtime period, and then second one just due to Kuznar's heroics. So I think Creighton does get the win over Tennessee because of the depth they have due to their scoring depth. Tennessee really relies on a guy like Dalton Connect to do majority of that work. So Creighton plays Purdue, and then Creighton is going to get beat Purdue because I think somebody like Ryan Kalkbrenner can take Zach Edey out of the game. And when you take Zach Edey out of the game for Purdue, they are just left standing there.
Yep.
So we have Creighton in the Final Four there. All right, moving. Yeah, all agreeing so far. I think we'll probably have some disagreement here, though, going to this last region in the West. You have North Carolina playing Alabama, and then Clemson playing Arizona. Guys, who do we have getting to the Final Four out of this region?
Look, I said Creighton and Tennessee was my second favorite Sweet 16 matchup. North Carolina, Alabama is by far my first because we were talking about it earlier when we were talking about Auburn. Guards are so important in this tournament. And if you want to watch the two best guards left in this tournament play each other, well, you do. We're in Los Angeles at like 9:00 for some reason. But North Carolina and Alabama is such a great matchup to me. Watching RJ Davis versus Mark Sears is going to be absolute cinema. It's by far the two best guards left in this tournament, especially scoring guards and guards who can completely change how an opponent guards your team. Alabama's defense, as bad as it's been throughout the regular season, they're going to have to play their absolute best game defensively against this RJ Davis led team because of the weapons that RJ Davis has around him. And the exact same thing goes for North Carolina. I think North Carolina is going to have to come up with an unbelievable game plan, especially the way Mark Sears has played his last two games. He's playing his best basketball right now of his entire collegiate career. And it's going to be fun to watch. I think the difference makers in this game are the two guys from North Carolina, Cormac Ryan and Harrison Ingram. I think if those two guys shoot the ball the way that they've shot the ball the last two games, I think that's the difference because I don't think Alabama has a guy to bang on the inside with Armando Bacot, rebound with him, and then defend him in the post. But if Cormac Ryan and Harrison Ingram aren't scoring the ball the way that they have shown, then Alabama's going to be able to hang around. And if Alabama hangs around, then Alabama's going to win down the stretch. I 100% agree with that. But I do think Harrison Ingram and Cormac Ryan shoot the ball a little better or enough to win this game and get past the Crimson Tide to advance to the Elite Eight. And the best thing about this region is in the Elite Eight, you're either going to get a North Carolina versus Caleb Love game, or you're going to get a rematch. Because North Carolina has played Clemson, and then you get Arizona. But if Alabama wins, they played both Clemson and Arizona. So it's such an interesting region. It's set up so well. I love this Clemson versus Arizona matchup, but just like we've been talking about this whole podcast, is guards matter. I think the better guard is Caleb Love. I think Clemson doesn't have the guards to compete with Arizona. I love PJ Hall. I love the way he plays, but this tournament's about guards, and that's what I'm picking based off of. So I've got to go with Arizona as well, and I cannot wait for that matchup of Caleb Love versus North Carolina in the Elite Eight for a chance to go back to the Final Four. Again, I think the difference will be Harrison Ingram and Cormac Ryan, how they shoot the ball from the outside specifically. If Harrison Ingram stays aggressive, he looked real timid in the ACC tournament, throughout the whole ACC tournament, especially when they got to the championship against NC State. Harrison Ingram looked a little scared, a little timid, not aggressive like he was in the middle of the regular season when he was scoring 15 points a game. If he's aggressive, RJ Davis versus Caleb Love is going to be incredible. Ballo versus Baycott is going to be incredible. But I got to go with my North Carolina Tar Heels advancing to the Final Four.
Before I get into my picks, I'm going to lay some fun facts out that I've recently learned or looked through stat wise. So for Alabama, their last 2 games, they are now up to 34 in the country in defensive efficiency, which they were over 100, which was completely awful. I think
Almost 200.
Thanks for the reminder, Alex. I got to watch it live a lot this season. But I think there's no denying that Alabama has stepped it up on the defensive end extremely well. I like the way Rylan Griffin has played defense, especially in the Grand Canyon game. He was very suffocating to whoever he was put on. I like the way Alabama has rebounded the ball in the last game. I think it was an improvement over what we did against Charleston. We gave a lot of offensive rebounds. We actually out rebounded Grand Canyon and had more offensive rebounds. Even down the stretch, it felt like Alabama showed a lot of adversity, especially when Grand Canyon went to the free throw line 500 different times. And for surprisingly only shot like 50% on them. For Alabama to win against North Carolina, you're going to need 2 things. You're going to need Mark Sears to play with his hair on fire, which he has been doing. So I think that's one thing you can count on. And then the other thing, Alabama has to get paint stops. Whenever you let North Carolina work into the paint with Armando Bacot and you try to double him and he passes out, he finds the open man more times than not. And more times than not, their North Carolina shooters are going to knock it down. I think the key for Alabama's success in this game is for Alabama to put one person on Armando Bacot, not to foul, but to play good, solid defense. And I'm talking guys like Grant Nelson and Nick Pringle, Muhammad Wagi. Those guys need to step up on the defensive end and really just hold Armando Bacot. When it comes down to shooters for North Carolina, you're going to have guys like Rylan Griffin guarding Cormac Ryan. Latrell Wrightso will be back and available for this game. It gives me a little bit more confidence in the pick I'm about to make. And I think Alabama, if Mark Sears plays the way he has been playing and Alabama figures it out shooting-wise, because the shooting was not there in the Grand Canyon game. It was in the Charleston game. They shot 67% from 3 in the Charleston game. I think we see that team on the offensive end and the same defensive team from last game. Alabama has a real shot of getting to the Elite Eight. And I'm going to make that pick because Alabama is just a hungry team right now. And I look at this Clemson-Arizona game. I watched the way Arizona played against Dayton, and they struggled at times, especially against Dayton's shooters. They kind of ran around the court. They were out of position. Ballo had struggled on the inside a little bit defensively, gave up a lot of shots at the rim. And I look at this Clemson team, the way they played against Baylor, their outside shooting was fantastic. They just were able to force a lot of turnovers, get a lot of points in transition. If Clemson can replicate this again against Arizona, I think there's a real shot that Clemson can get the win. I don't know if I want to take Clemson just yet. I had Arizona out of this region to begin with, but I think I'm going to pick Clemson over Arizona. And then Arizona, I mean, Clemson and Alabama in the Elite Eight. That's just
this is football.
Yeah, this is football. Gosh, I think I'm going to take Clemson. So I have Clemson coming out of this region.
Wow. Okay, that's
Yeah.
That's a something.
Yeah.
So I look at North Carolina, Alabama. Y'all had pointed out some great things there. Like Greg pointed out with North Carolina, if Cormac Ryan and Harrison Ingram play bad, if Harrison Ingram plays like he played against Michigan State, and Cormac Ryan plays like he did against Duke in the regular season, that last game, then Alabama can just go ahead and pack it on up and go on home. There's just no way you keep up with that. But if Harrison Ingram and Cormac Ryan struggle, Elliot Kiddo is already a non-threat from the three-point line. So if they all struggle, Amardo Bacot will get triple teamed in the post, and it'll just be the RJ Davis, please help us show. Yeah. And that's like that. There's absolutely no way RJ Davis himself can keep up with Alabama, especially if Alabama's playing good defense. And if you look at Alabama, if they play defense like they did against Grand Canyon and Charleston, and if they shoot the 3-ball well, then they have a chance. And if Mark Sears plays the way he's been playing, then that'll bolster their chances here. But I think North Carolina, they're a lot more experienced in the tournament. Armando Bacot played for the national championship team along with RJ Davis, Harrison Ingram, and Cormac Ryan. Cormac Ryan might as well be an insurance agent at this point, the way how old he is, 25 years old. They have so much experience there. And I think that experience is going to be the difference here and get them to win over Alabama. And then look at Clemson, Arizona. I know Caleb Love is the guard you look for in that matchup, but for Clemson, Chase Hunter, their guard, has been playing stellar basketball these last couple of games. Joe Girard is a really good 3-point shooter. And then you look at their big men, Ian Shefflin and then PJ Hall. Like Nathan pointed out, Bala has been struggling to defend the inside these past couple of games. And if he does that this game against a guy like PJ Hall, he'll eat him alive.
Yeah.
So I think Clemson does upset Arizona here because they have a lot more firepower and Arizona is more heavily reliant on Caleb Love to get things done. And as me and Gray have seen with Caleb Love at UNC, dude's either going to, he's either going to be really good or he's going to be like 2 for 15, like Wade Taylor was last night for A&M. So North Carolina, Clemson play a rematch from earlier in the regular season. I think North Carolina gets the win here against Clemson. As much as I think it's going to be a dogfight between the two, I have North Carolina advancing to the Final Four. Guys, so Gray, your Final Four is UConn, UNC, Houston, and then Creighton, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, then Nathan's is UConn, Houston, Creighton, and Clemson.
Mm-hmm.
And then mine's UConn, Houston, Creighton, and North Carolina. So, guys, who do you have winning the national championship with that Final Four?
So in the North Carolina UConn game, that's a battle of experience. That's a battle of big man. Klingon versus Baycott will be great. I really do think it's going to come down to, at that point, who's playing the best basketball, who has gone through the tougher opponents. Who I think North Carolina has gone through the tougher opponents, but who looks different. When I picked UConn to advance to the Final Four, I said that they just don't look like a college team that is going to be challenged, honestly. Just like last year in the tournament, they just weren't challenged at all. So I do think UConn advances to the national championship over North Carolina. I think even if Harrison Ingram and Cormac Ryan are shooting well, I think UConn's just too much. I really do. Their defense is so suffocating. They're so hard to play against. Outside of that one Creighton game earlier in the regular season, UConn has not played a bad game. I don't think it comes in the Final Four. And then the Houston versus Creighton matchup, I love that matchup. That's a matchup of Trey Alexander, Jamal Shed, LJ Cryer, Baylor Shire. That's a fantastic Final Four game. That's the game you tune in for. I was going to pick Creighton, but I don't like how I have the Big East championship, so I'm going to go Houston. So you got 2 1 seeds competing in the championship, Houston and UConn. And just like I said, when I picked UConn to beat North Carolina, they're just going to be too different for Houston. It'd be by far Houston's hardest test. They thought Iowa State was hard in the Big 12 championship. Just wait once y'all get to play UConn. I think UConn wins the national championship.
So I know my Final Four isn't very it's unoriginal, it's unorthodox having Clemson in the Final Four. But in past tournaments, there's been multiple times where an unexpected team comes out and gets to the Final Four. I think Clemson can be that team, but they unfortunately would have to match up against the UConn Huskies, and they will get squashed like bugs. They have no shot. They might as well not even show up to play the game because I mean, this UConn team, it looks like an almost, I would say, G League team. I'm not going to put it in the same conversation like Mike Greenberg, but a G League team, there are some bad G League teams out there. So I think you can put them in that conversation. I would give UConn the win there. They're going to advance to the national championship. And then I look at Houston and Creighton, and this is really back and forth decision in my head. But the way Kelvin Sampson has continued to coach, he's been in the situation before. And I look at Creighton and where their struggles lie on the offensive end. Sometimes they cannot get going. They wait to the last 2 seconds of the shot clock to find the open man, and they're not shooting the ball well, and they're continuing to panic, especially against a really good Houston defense, which suffocates you at times. I think I'm gonna give Houston the win out of that. So, hey, UConn and Houston in the Final Four. I mean, in the national championship. I'm gonna stick by my original pick. I'm gonna pick Houston to win, even though UConn is playing out of their mind. winning back-to-back national championships is a very hard feat to overcome. And with the way Houston has continued to play this year, they made the Big 12 look like it was a cupcake division when they played people. And I can't ignore the results from that conference, and I'm surely not ignoring the results from the past 2 games in the tournament. So I think Houston's going to go ahead and get a national championship.
So I'm going to be completely different here. I'm going to take North Carolina beats UConn. I know y'all pointed out UConn is playing a different brand of basketball, but I think North Carolina is hungry, and I think they have this once again the experience. Amarno Bacot, Cormac Ryan, RJ Davis, Harrison Ingram, all old guys. So I think that depth of experience there, and the fact that, like Nathan just pointed out, it's very hard to repeat as much as UConn is dominating the tournament once again. I think North Carolina gets the win over them. And then Houston, Creighton. I think Creighton gets the win over Houston. Creighton has a lot of shot creators. I know Houston, you have Jamal Shed, LJ Cryer, and then Sharp just had a game of his life against A&M. But I look at Creighton, Kalkbrenner. I mean, he made some three-pointer. I was like, where in the world did this come from? If he can shoot like that, and then you have Trey Alexander creating shots off the dribble, Shireman, you have Ashworth, who was basically the catalyst for them to get that win over Oregon in overtime. He was kind of their go-to guy. So I think they just have more firepower than Houston and have been getting the win over the Cougars there. So you have UNC and Creighton, and I'll stay the North Carolina homer here and pick North Carolina to get the national championship win.
Had to be one of you.
Had to be one of us.
That's true. Well, what happened the last time the Final Four was in Glendale? Alex was just repeating history.
Just remember, I could say 2 words right here, and y'all could have a bad day.
Yeah, you could.
Alice
and then we
exactly
from the
2
show.
words.
Yeah, it's a person's name.
Kershinkins?
UCLA?
Alex, I don't care about that. That is in the past.
Well, all right. Well,
we're going to have an extreme battle here Thursday. I hope you know that.
Well, we'll be back next week. We'll have the Final Four. We'll just dissect that, and then we'll pick the national championship once again if somehow it's chaos and we have NC State and Gonzaga and San Diego State and Clemson all somehow getting the Final Four. I don't know. We'll see what happens. We'll be back. We'll be expecting that. All right. Well, we'll be back next week to cover all that. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening and watching, students of the game.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.